In a world where legends rise and fall with every punch, where the roar of the crowd fades, but the stories live on. This is where those stories are told. This is Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. From the blood, the sweat, and the glory, to the controversies, comebacks, and knockouts, we go behind the ring, no fluff, no hype, and definitely no BS. Just the truth behind the fight game. And we've been doing it for over 2 decades. A podcast pioneer, now a Hall of Famer.
Great. What's that ego gonna be like?
And next, the comeback kid.
Wait, isn't he like 90 or something?
Shut up, he'll hear you. The reigning, defending, undisputed, heavyweight champion of boxing broadcasting. It's Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. And it's on now.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to us in part by, you guessed it, you missed it last time, right? My book, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold, and you can get a copy of it right now while you're listening to the show, or whether you're watching it or listening to the replay on the podcast. Just go to Amazon.com and get yourself a copy. If you're looking to get a signed copy, just drop me an email, bill@billycboxing.com. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the BillyCBoxing.com website. Hey, basically, if you want to follow and subscribe to us, which of course we want you to follow us and or subscribe to us, either here on Facebook, on YouTube, on Rumble, wherever you get your podcasts, just visit BillyCBoxing.com and sign up, subscribe, follow. You'll see them all right there. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the new podcast that's taken the world by storm. It's called Above My Pay Grade, and we're going to have the stars of that show coming on next week, actually. And finally, today's show is being brought to us in part by not the next, because there's a show next weekend, but the next show I'm going to be ringside. CES Boxing is doing their November 1st event at the Mohegan Sun. So if you haven't gotten tickets for that yet, make sure that you get them soon. And hey, if you're going to be there, make sure you say, hey, to me, I'll be ringside. So give a shout out to the guys that are in the chat room early. If you're watching or listening now from one of the other streams, come on over to the YouTube chat room and give us your thoughts and comments and all that stuff. My man Hawk and Jeff and Dave are in there right now. So give a shout out to them. Listen, today's main topic. Now we're scheduled to have an undefeated female fighter coming on a little bit later. I have not gotten a confirmation from her, but I am assuming that she will be here, Amelia Moore. So we're looking forward to chatting with her a little bit later on the show. One of today's topics is, is Dana White and his Zuffa boxing going to be good for boxing or not? I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, actually in a couple of minutes, because I wanted to just go through some of the quick. There was a boxing event and some news that I wanted to touch on first, just to get it out of the way.
Good evening. We're going to go to my future wife, God willing, with weather in just a moment. But first, here's Billy C. with the latest boxing update.
Yeah, that's our new segue into our boxing updates. These are just some results from the weekend and some other boxing news. On DAZN, which seems to be the place to watch fights from England, one of my favorite places because I think that the fight game there is so remarkable. From Belfast, Ben Crocker ended up losing his European lightweight title when Sean McComb beat him in a I'm a little stumbling today. I didn't get much sleep last night. In the super lightweight contest, he improved to 20 wins, 2 losses, with 5 of them coming by knockout. Now he's in line for a world title shot. And Ben Crocker only lost for the first time in his career. He drops to 14-1-1 with a couple of knockouts. In the co-main event, it was an exciting fight. Gratis Kraus improved to 8-0 with 7 knockouts when he fought Scott Forrest to a unanimous 8-round decision. 60-53 were the way all 3 of the judges scored that. Forrest drops to 7-2, and Kraus improves to 8-0. And one other fight I wanted to mention was actually going on today. The Zone has a fight coming from Nigeria. And I got to, the main event is Brandon Glatton versus Marcus Brown. I didn't get to see that because it didn't show yet. But on the undercard, here's a guy I want you to keep an eye out for, because you're going to see him. Now, I can't believe he's not rated anywhere. I checked before I came on air. He's not rated anywhere. But Taiwo Abaja, he's an undefeated featherweight. This guy, he had a beautiful knockout win over previously unbeaten Isdria Makarani to improve to 17-0. After the fight, he called out Nick Ball, which I tell you, the styles of these two guys would make one hell of a fight. But keep an eye on him. Taiwo Abaja is his name. Undefeated, 17-0, and he's a featherweight. So FYI there. Some other news I wanted to mention. I don't know if you caught this, but Terrence Crawford had a victory parade, and it was also his birthday, and he was having a good time. The Omaha, Nebraska, they had it in Nebraska, of course. The mayor and the police chief, they were all there. Everybody was having a good time until Crawford went to go home, and he got pulled over, cuffed. Everybody in the car was yanked out of the car. They all had guns, but they all had license to carry those guns. And everything's being looked into now. There's rumor that it was just a stereotypical pullover, which shouldn't have happened, especially to Terrence Crawford. So we'll wait to see if anything about that comes through. And last but not least, for some quick news, Frazier Clark and Giami TKV are fighting for the British heavyweight title on Saturday, October 25th. And it's going to actually be on primetime television over in England, BBC primetime. I don't kind of get this. I mean, Frazier Clark, his only big fights were 2, and they were against Fabio Wardley. And Wardley right now is catapulted into the top. He's being talked about title challenges and everything else. And his only big fight was against Frazier Clark. But anyway, Frazier Clark is fighting for the British heavyweight belt. But in any event, that's some news there. So listen, is Dana White could be good for boxing? I'll give a shout out to Dela Duran, the great Roberto Duran's daughter. She just popped into the chat room. She's great for the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame, and she kept us all in line. So I'll give a shout out to her. Thank you for the support. Dana White and Zuffa Boxing. I don't know if you saw some of the stuff that he's looking to do, but it was released over the last couple of days. And let me just go over what he's doing. Then I'm going to give you my take. All right. He's announced officially that Zuffa Boxing, that he's going to be teamed up with Turki Al-Rashid, and they are not recognizing any of the current belts. In other words, no WBA, WBC, WBO, or IBF. They're going to incorporate their new belt, the Zuffa boxing belt. And once somebody wins that belt, then they're going to be in line to fight for a ring championship belt. White said, and I quote, there will be a Zuffa belt, and then there will be a ring belt. I'm not going to recognize any of the other sanctioning bodies. So to me, this sounds like it's separating boxing, not unifying boxing, and it's identical to the UFC. Here's the thing. They also, between the two of them, Zuffa Boxing and Turki Al-Rashid, landed a broadcast deal with Paramount for next year. 12 boxing events will be on Paramount, and it's a 5-year deal. So that's huge. And TKO Group, which owns the UFC and the WWE. You see the parallel here I'm trying to get to. I mean, this is what it's becoming. It's so they're trying to separate themselves. And here's my problem. Everybody ran to Turki Al-Rashid because they're following the money. All the promoters, they're all patting them on the back, racing to get their fighters there. Traditionally promotional outfits that didn't work together are all of a sudden working together because of the do-re-mi. And now all of a sudden Dana White comes in. He actually promoted the Crawford-Canelo fight. And, now he's going to make some changes. And one of the things is he's trying to change or at least modify the Muhammad Ali Act. Now, why is he doing that? Well, he's doing that because he wants to sign fighters long-term. He wants to dictate the salaries. And, well, does it sound like the UFC? Because it is the UFC. Now, I'm not saying that model couldn't work, because the UFC has proven that it does work. And we get good fights. The fighters are ordered to fight each other, and the power of the corporation, so to speak, UFC in this case, if they don't follow, they're done. So I think Dana White and Turki Al-Rashid are feeling that they could do the same thing. He also mentioned that he has no real desire to work with other promoters. Well, that's kind of strange, because the other promoters are all finally starting to work together because of Turki Al-Rashid. And then you get this. And one of the things that bothers me about this is, if you think about it, okay, so if you go back, I'm going to jump to another part of time. If you go back in history, Don King, who owned pretty much all the best fights back in the day, and Bob Arum, Butch Lewis was another one. These guys didn't necessarily like each other, but they got together when the big fights had to be made, and they made the fights. And we got to see some great fights during those eras. Hagler Hearns, Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of Roberto Duran's fights. And here's the thing. They didn't like each other. They didn't want to do anything with each other. They wanted to promote their own fighters. But when the main fights that the fans wanted to see needed to be made, well, then these promoters put their grievances aside and got together and made the fights, right? Well, what started happening here and after that is that the promoters, because of the success of the UFC, decided that they were going to have their own promotional company, have their own fighters, and, close out the other promoters and run with their fighters. The PBC, if you recall, had their own belt, and they hit the waves several years back, and everybody thought they were going to save boxing. They started putting a plethora of fights on every channel known to man, and everybody thought it was great. Well, it didn't work out that well, because all the deals that they made and the money that Al Heyman spent from the people that backed him went up in flames quickly. And before you knew it, all the networks were dropping them. And now the PBC is garbage. And the truth of the matter is their fights are all pay-per-view. So they've totally blown up the model, and they have no juice at all. Now you look at Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, they tried the same thing. I think Oscar was smart enough to realize that, he had to work with other promoters. Matchroom is no different. They started doing their own thing. Top Rank started doing their own thing. But, as time went on, and as we are in the last couple of years of boxing, all these promoters have gotten together, and we've had some sporadic, posts of fights, and all these things. Now, you fast forward to now, and you're hearing this stuff with Dana White and all he wants to do. My question is, how do you control the fighters? The fighters traditionally have gone and chased the money, right? They chase the money. And, the only way to do this would be to not allow fighters to fight outside of this particular promotion company, which I'm sure is the blueprint. That's the plan. But how do you get fighters not to do that? How do you get the top fighters today to not do that? You won't. But what you can do is you can get the younger fighters and tie them up in contracts and then build it from scratch, which is the way I think they're looking at it. There are a couple of big fights left, and that's where Turki Ali-Sheed comes in. He'll make those fights. They'll sprinkle in their guys along the way, build up their fighters that are signed to long contracts, etc., and then kick the other fighters to the curb. Do I think it's going to be good or bad for boxing? Well, I think what boxing needs 100% is unity, not separation. We don't need boxing to be separated into Zuffa Boxing's guys and Golden Boy's guys and Matchroom's guys. I mean, that's what hurts boxing. That's why we don't get the fights and we don't get the good fights. Shout out to my man Dave in the chat room, congratulating us. And I'll give him a return shout out to his podcast, Coach's Corner, which I've seen. As a matter of fact, I think my man John Carlo was on it. But in any event, I'm going to have John on here. We went to school together, and John owns a unique piece of boxing history. Here's a trivia question. Who is the only fighter to make his pro debut and knock out a former undisputed world heavyweight champion? And the answer is Johnny Bombs Carlo, when he fought his first fight against former undisputed world heavyweight champion Leon Spinks and knocked him out. Anyway, this is a good segue. And by the way, if you guys want to have any questions answered, or if you have any comments or current concerns that you want to have on the show, the best way is to drop me an email, bill@billycboxing.com, or if you have the other website addresses, you can email me and I'll read your emails. If you reply or message me on social media, I will do it as well. Like I'm going to do this one from my man Mike. Mike sent me a question over social media, and it said, and let me tell you something. This was such a good question and segue into today's show. He says, "Hey, Billy C, I hope you're well. I watched the final 4 rounds of the Marino Garcia fight. It was like watching a movie. It was a great match. What's your thoughts?" Well, let me tell you something, boys and girls. I didn't include it in my round boxing results earlier because I knew I was going to talk about it. This is the fight, okay? And not only was it an entertaining fight, the fight was on Saturday out of Florida, my new adopted state, which I love. And it was a scheduled 10-round junior middleweight fight between Emiliano Moreno, who was 12-0 with 7 knockouts, and he was fighting against Raul Garcia, who was 14 wins, 2 losses, and a draw, with 12 of his wins coming by knockout. And both of these fighters had been in a couple of decent fights going into this. And personally, I thought Garcia had the tougher level opponents. I mean, he lost 2 and he had a draw in another. So generally, that's an indication of, being in some tough fights, or at least being in fights that are above the level that you're currently in. If you watch this fight, in my opinion, this is what boxing is all about, really. What we need is fights like this to be the norm and not the exception. From the 3rd round on, this was an action-packed back-and-forth fight. Both fighters landing hard shots. I was shocked that there were no knockdowns. They were close to being knockouts. The fight was nothing less than a war, and it's already been mentioned as a fight of the year candidate. Garcia won the first 2 rounds on my unofficial scorecard because Moreno didn't do much. His claim is that he always starts slow and blah, blah, blah. Well, this is something I think all fighters need to understand. It's definitely something I've mentioned, to fighters I've worked with. You must win all the rounds. You can't give up a round and say, well, I'm feeling them out, I'm doing this. Even if you're doing a feel-out round, you got to land more punches so that you win the round. In my opinion, these first couple of rounds of this fight ended up giving Raul Garcia the win. I mean, the way the judges scored it, 96-94, 97-93, 98-92. I get it. The 98-92 was one-sided. But, if he didn't win those first 2 rounds, the result is different. It was a great fight. Garcia now is 15-2-1 with 12 knockouts. Moreno drops his first fight of his career. He's now 12-1. This is what boxing needs. If you're looking for a blueprint, this is it. And the reason why I say this is it is because these were 2 fighters. And remember what I said going into the fight. You had a 17-fight guy going up against a 12-fight guy. 14-2-1 was Garcia's record. 12-0 was Moreno's record. And they both had fought similar opposition. So if you're looking to get the trick of how to make boxing great again and how to have meaningful fights, the powers that be need to take young fighters like these 2 and put them against each other earlier on, like these 2 did. Now, here's the thing. Does anybody really lose in this fight? Okay, so Moreno picks up the first L on his career. But I guarantee you he learned something from this fight. The trick with moving up a fighter isn't feeding him the same level fighter that he can kick the shit out of every time that they go out. And that's what we get today. I was talking about it last week on the show about Ituma, heavyweight, who's now, been catapulted into stardom because, he beat Dillian White, which was his first test after, how many fights. So what you end up with is really a guy that hasn't been tested. Now all of a sudden he's facing, top-notch opposition, and they never fare as well as you would expect, or at least you would expect based on the other fights where they're dominating guys that, have no business being in the same ring with them, But if you take guys like these 2 and you put them in the ring earlier on in their careers, and, they fight each other, what you're going to get is you're going to get fighters that, increase their level of opposition as they go on. And, in Moreno's case, he lost the fight. So now if I'm working with Moreno, I'm looking for another guy that's similar to Raul Garcia, or maybe a notch below, for him to fight next. And, use what he learned in the Garcia fight. Now, he wins that fight. He moves up. Now, as far as Garcia goes, same thing. He needs to take a little step upward. And what you end up with is true rankings. Because if you rank these guys like this, and they beat the guy ahead of them, they're climbing the ladder. You look at the rankings, and if we have time, I'm going to look at the middleweight rankings today. It's ultimately a joke. The fighters, and like I told you today, this young fighter I watch, he's not even in the rankings, and he's a quality fighter. Why isn't he in the rankings? Because he probably doesn't have the money behind him or anything like that. The problem today is you have one fighter that stays unbeaten, but he never passes a certain level fighter until he gets his title shot. And all that produces is mediocre fighters. If you have to climb a ladder and move up, our contenders would become much better fighters. So you could be proud that you're ranked at number 10 or number 6 or number 11 or number 2, because that you're climbing the ladder. You get real fighters. And then the ultimate end result is not only do you get real fighters, you get fighters that are fighting each other, and the fights are better. So not only do you produce better fighters, you're producing better fights. This is what you need to do. Like Marino and Garcia did by fighting each other. We need more fighters here in the States, because I got news for you, boys and girls. In England, where I when I started this show 22 years ago, my dream was to be in England to do fights. Dave's saying money moves the fighter, Billy. Yeah, no shit. I mean, that's the problem. The money, and I've been involved with many fighters, management and everything else. What you have to do is the managers or the promoters have to turn around and pay for the opponent. Look, I'm sure that Dave knows this, and most other people know it as well. The truth of the matter is that a fighter, in most cases, the opponent, when you're building up a fighter, the opponent is making more money than the A-side guy. Why? Because you're paying him to lose. You're not telling him to take a dive, but you're paying him to go in there, and he knows damn well that he's not going to beat the guy that they're being put in. Now, there's sometimes when the guys say, great, I'll make as much money as I can. I'm in better shape, and I'm going to open up a can of you-know-what on this guy. And it does happen. But that's the problem. And, Dave, yeah, you mentioned it, but that's the problem. We should have true fighters moving up. And let me ask you this, Dave. If money moves fighters, then why won't the powers that be that are involved with a fighter why don't they test them more and do it? You know why? I'll tell you why. Here's another social media post that explains it, okay? And this is people still talking about, here's my man Kappa, give him a shout out, and Hawk. There was a social media post, and people still talking about Floyd Mayweather, right? Which irks the hell out of me, because number one, Floyd Mayweather is not the best ever. He's not the greatest of all time, blah, blah, blah. He's not the number one. I can't stand when I see it. It's like everybody is just so stuck on that because Mayweather himself has brainwashed everybody. But check out this post, and I think this explains it. This person wrote, Mayweather is one of the influential fighters in the sport of boxing. Here's why. And he lists 5 reasons. The first reason, Philly shell. Now it's widely used. Number 2, he's got a perfect record. He sold his record. Now fighters are afraid to take losses. Number 3, he only fought once or twice a year. Number 4, fighters are now promoters. He's saying he's mentioning all of this as a credit to Mayweather. And he says his language, he's a tough competitor, doing A and B sides. And this guy says he can go on and on. Well, you know what my thoughts of this post is? Aside from number 1, numbers 2 through 5 are the problem. This is the problem. This is the exact problem that boxing has. Because, yeah, Mayweather was successful, and Mayweather was a great salesman. And he brainwashed everybody to think that the perfect record is all you need. So, yes, Dave, this is the bottom line. This is why people are paying fighters to lose, basically, or paying an opponent to fight their fighter so that fighter can pad their record. Come on, boys and girls. I'm not BSing. That's the facts. Now, what does that take? What does boxing become when that's what we have? What does it become? What does it become? Look at our ratings right now. Look at these fighters. I wasn't going to get into it right now, but in the middleweight division, which is a glamour division, right? I mean, let's face it, heavyweight division and then middleweight division traditionally were the two top divisions, right? You look at the WBA, which is the joke of all sanctioning bodies. They have from number 7 to 12 not rated. Nobody's even there. Nobody's even ranked. And like I was talking about last week, how do you have a number 1 ranked guy, a number 3 ranked guy, and not rated for number 2? You want to know why? Because logic would tell you that the number 3 guy moves into the number 2 spot and everybody else moves up, right? I mean, that's logic, right? That's common sense, right? No, not with sanctioning bodies, because guess how you get those spots, boys and girls? Dave, go ahead, answer it. Money gets those spots. They pay for those spots, basically. Why do you think a sanctioning body, I'm off topic, but why do you think a sanctioning body only ranks the fighters that they work with? Why do you suppose a champion in one sanctioned body isn't even ranked in another? So if we were getting true rankings, right, which we all used to think the ring ratings was a true ranking, right? We used to believe that. That's not the case anymore. It changed when, and Oscar, I respect you immensely, but it changed when Golden Boy bought Ring Magazine, and all of a sudden, poof, we started seeing Golden Boy fighters in all the ring ratings, right? Well, guess what, boys and girls? Turkey Al-Rashid bought the Ring Magazine, and what do you think you're going to start seeing? All right, and now that Zuffa Boxing is and Dana White are they're in bed together, so to speak. What do you think you're going to see? So are we getting true rankings? No. And if the promoter isn't going to let his fighter fight another promoter's fighter because they recognize another belt, I mean, all we're getting is more and more division in this sport. Hey, listen, people always ask me all the time, hey, Billy C., how could boxing get back to being number 1? How could boxing get back to mainstream media? Blah, blah, blah. How can this all happen? Well, there's only one way it can happen. There's only one way. And the only way would be to have more fights like Marino and Sanchez. Garcia. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my next thing. Speaking of Sanchez, how about Frank Sanchez? Frank Sanchez is a heavyweight, right? We all saw him fight. He suffered his first loss. He should have never gotten a ring that night. His leg was messed up. But anyway, so here's how confusing it gets. And this is with, what is this with? This is the IBF, right? So Frank Sanchez, and this is another thing. When they fight for these, interim belts or elimination belts, all that's really telling us is that, the guy who's holding all the belts, in this case, the heavyweight Usyk, he's going to get a mandatory challenger, and if not, they strip him of his belt. Hawk is backing what I'm saying. He's figured that the boxing rankings were all BS back in the early 90s. He's also mentioned Tank Davis is following the Mayweather blueprint. Well, the thing is Tank Davis is taking it a step further. And listen, I want to be interactive with you guys, so I am going to be jumping around. If you bring up something in the chat room, I will respond if I see it. As the chat room is going by, sometimes I don't catch it. But Tank is taking it a step further than Mayweather. At least Mayweather stayed in boxing. At least Mayweather was always in good shape. He's still in good shape. Yes, he's brainwashed a whole generation of people thinking he was so great by cherry picking, blah, blah, blah. Guys like Terrence Crawford, in my opinion, will rank, and even Manny Pacquiao, who lost to Floyd, is on my all-time great list, which now you can't have a guy that's still active on your all-time great list, in my opinion. Will be above Floyd. I have Floyd right now currently at number 25 on my list because there's so many other better fighters, and it's not, the O doesn't mean anything when you're talking about all-time greats. But check this out, all right? Frank Sanchez is trying to get an elimination bout for the IBF to fight, to be the winner of the elimination bout would be next in line to fight for the world heavyweight title, which is currently owned by Alexander Usyk. So they're trying to find an opponent, right? Well, the next guy in line, because Sanchez is ranked number 4, which, by the way, when you're fighting for titles, the number 1 ranked contender should always be fighting for the title. How they slip in a number 4 and a number 6 fighting for the mandatory shot at the champion, I don't know. Yes, I do know. It's all about the do-re mi. It's about the money. Listen, Cap writes, I believe the WBA got caught taking bribes from Don King. They all listen. They all don't you see how it works? If you've ever been involved with boxing up close, you see it. Basically they're like, hey, you got a fighter? Yeah, you need him ranked in the top 5. Well, what can you put in my left hand to make me take my right hand and pencil in his name at number 5? So I mean, yeah. It happens, and it's unfortunate. But anyway, back to the Sanchez situation. He's ranked at number 4 by the IBF. This is by the IBF, and they're trying to find an opponent. Now, Derek Chisora is actually ranked number 2 in that, but he's going to be fighting on a card that features Ituma, and Chisora is basically just calling it a career. Now, why he wouldn't take an elimination fight, I don't know. He's probably picking a guy that he knows he's going to win, and he wants to get the W, right? Well, Ituma has passed. They haven't made a decision yet. Why? Here's a shot at the title. He just got catapulted into the limelight, so to speak, with his win over Dillian White. Well, they don't know if they want to fight, because they might want to take on someone else. So they're basically he's trying to take on a lesser opponent. Now, in boxing today, the elimination bouts sound good, right? But at the end of the day, all it is another sanctioning fee. If they're going down the line and they have, in this case, Sanchez, and the first guy that they want to fight is Ituma, Ituma says, nah, I don't want that fight. Well, you don't want a title elimination fight? Because I might be getting an easier fight for another title elimination fight, right? So they go down the line, and they actually go up 2 spots, and Chisora turns it down, right? So then now, they keep going down the line, and who do they come up with? Richard Torres. Richard Torres has got 13 fights under his belt. 13. He's 13-0. He's ranked by the IBF at number 6. 13-0. 11 knockouts. I mean, let's be honest. No offense, but this isn't Yuriorkis Gamboa, who had 300 amateur fights. This isn't a guy. Full amateur career where they fight hundreds of fights, and you got 13 pro fights, and you're ready for a title fight. This is Richard Torres, and he's ranked number 6, and he doesn't know if he wants to take the fight, because his team is Top Rank, and Bob Arum, they're too busy trying to secure another television deal because the ESPN deal went south. So they're trying to keep all their fighters in limbo so that they can offer some whoever deal they make with some fights. And this was Terrence Crawford's issue. He was tied up with Top Rank, and he didn't get to fight. So the bottom line is we're not getting the best fights. And as you keep moving on, these fighters just, all of a sudden you'll get a guy, like Hrgovic. Filip Hrgovic is a good fighter, right? He could have signed a fight, but he's taken on David Adderley instead. in I'm sorry, he beat David Adderley in August 16th. So now he's looking to potentially get another elimination shot. And guess who Adderley is rumored to be signed to fight? Ituma. So instead of Ituma taking on Frank Sanchez, who in my opinion is a legitimate heavyweight contender, and I also agree that Ituma is a legitimate heavyweight contender. Why not have them fight each other? I mean, shit. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, you have two fighters that are on the way up. Does it ruin Ituma's record if he gets a loss? I mean, by the way, Sanchez has a loss on his record. It hasn't affected him. You think it's going to affect Ituma? No, but this goes all the way back to what I was saying about the fight between Raul Garcia and Emiliano Marino, where you need these young fighters to fight each other. Because if they don't fight each other, you end up with these watered down fighters that are ranked, and it just doesn't. How do you keep a fan? How do you keep fans watching the sport of boxing? Okay, how do you keep fans watching the sport of boxing when the fights are all one sided? We used to see fights when, if you wanted to gamble on a fight, right? You used to see, 2-1 odds, maybe a lot of 50-50 fights. I'm talking back in the day, right? Maybe 3-1 odds. Today, when you go to place a bet on a fight, you're laying $1,500 on one guy to win $100. I mean, the odds makers know how one-sided. I mean, what idiot would bet like that? I mean, yeah, okay, a 1,500 to 1 fighter. I mean, he has to practically break a leg to lose the fight. So you say to yourself, I'll win $100. I'll lay 1,500. Yeah, well, you never know what's going to happen in boxing. You get some freak thing happen, a referee, low blow, guy gets DQ'd, or you get some, judges with what's on this hand, and I'll do my scorecard with that hand. I mean, it happens, boys and girls. It happens. I don't want to, accuse anybody, and I won't accuse anybody, but I will tell you that it happens. My man Joel is in the chat room. Hey, I hope you're throwing us on Triller. Hawk says 20-0. Never fought anybody. Yeah, well, that's what happens. That's what happens with the game. The fight game becomes fighters that have these beautiful looking records, and they haven't fought anybody, and they're pounding the chest, and then they have fans that have bought into that, thinking that their fighter is good. And it goes back to the points that this social media post had, all right, where he's giving Mayweather all these credits for doing what I'm complaining about right now, selling fighters on a perfect record. Well, he didn't just sell the fighters wanting perfect records. He sold it to the promoters and the managers and everything else. All of a sudden, promoters feel they can't promote a fighter unless he's undefeated, which is ridiculous. If a fighter is good, I mean, Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson fought 6 times. Every one of the fights was a war. Jake LaMotta only won one of them. You think that, diminished his value because he lost to the greatest fighter of all time 5 times? He got 1 win. Does that diminish Sugar Ray Robinson because he has a loss to Jake LaMotta? I mean, it's the attitude, Cap is mentioning Edgar Berlanga. The funny thing, he's a great example. And the other thing about Berlanga is that Berlanga all of a sudden, is acting like he's, after his loss, that he's, that much, that he's all that. Who was the guy that I keep forgetting his name, that fought? It was the Puerto Rican fighter, and I believe Yeah. Now I'm going blank on the whole fight, so forget the point. But anyway, this social media post, a perfect record, fighting once a year, fighters being their own promoters. I mean, look, fighters being their own promoters, I don't disagree with that in a sense, I, except I believe that they should become promoters after their career, because that's what boxing is lacking today. Boxing is lacking boxing people. Back in the day, when you had gyms on every corner in every major city, boxing gyms, that is, you had guys that were full-time boxing people. They started out sweeping the floor when they were a kid. They fought in the amateurs. Then they fought pros, and whether they made it to a title shot or a contender, when you only had 8 weight classes, make it to a contender. When they were done, they became trainers, or they became managers, or they became promoters. These are guys that were boxing people. We had boxing people involved with boxing. Football, the NFL, you have NFL people involved with football. You're not going to get a tennis star involved in football. Baseball people have baseball people. Boxing people used to have boxing people. It was a trade. You became a boxer, you were involved with the sport. If you weren't very good inside the ring, or you couldn't be a good trainer / teacher, then you got into other aspects of the game. I boxed and I didn't like getting punched in the face, so I took a different route. So my career in the ring didn't last long. I had under 10 amateur fights. That's it. And that was the end of that. But I got into every other aspect of the sport except for training. And you look at these guys now in the corner, and I get nauseous, because you get a fighter that comes back to the corner, and they're training, and all you're hearing, and I've said this for years, all you're hearing in the build up to a fight is, when the trainer's talking, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we worked hard, we, like it's a French song, right? We, right? And then the fighter loses, and what does the trainer say? He didn't do this, he didn't do that, he didn't do that. What happened to we? What happened to win as a team, lose as a team? But the problem is, the trainers, most of them, aren't good trainers. They're not good teachers. You know what they're good at? Rah, 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 cheer, cheer. Let's do this. Let's mentally, take deep breaths, all this mental stuff. Listen, you need to know what you're doing. When a fighter comes back to the corner and he's getting his tail whooped, and he comes back to the corner, he can't get over, can't get away from this guy's jab, or the guy's landing, overhand rights to him at will, and he can't get back to it. He can't avoid it. He comes back to the corner, and what should the corner man say? The corner man should say, hey, listen, you're taking too many overhand rights. Do this to avoid that. Or, you got to step aside his jab. He keeps jabbing you, and you're freezing in there. You got to move away from him. No, you know what I hear a lot? I hear a lot of, hey, listen, stop getting hit by the jab. You're being hit by that overhand right. You got to stop that. Yeah, the fighter says to himself, yeah, I know. How do I do that? And then next thing, they spurt some water, rinse out the mouthpiece, get back in there, kid, because they don't know what to say. Because the truth is, and the irony of this all, is the simple fact that you can, hey, listen, you could say what you want about Hawk is saying Teddy Atlas. Teddy Atlas knows the game. He's a little, what do firemen do? What do firemen do? Put out fires, Teddy? They go busting in. But the truth of the matter is he knows the sport. He's a little over the top, and I think he took too many shots himself at this point. But that's him. And something about Teddy, and he's not the friendliest guy. I covered some fights when he was still with ESPN, and I had dinner. I sat right next to him at one of the casinos. We were eating in the same place. He said, hey, Teddy, how you doing? He thinks like he's too good to say hello. We're riding in the same elevator. Hey, Teddy, how you doing? But The truth of the matter is we need teachers in the sport of boxing. We need promoters that actually want to promote. We need managers that actually want to manage their fighters. Hawk's asking me if I think Bomac's a good trainer. That's an excellent question. I'll come back and I'll say, was Kevin Rooney a good trainer? And I knew Kevin Kevin and I were pretty good friends. And I helped him with a young fighter after Mike Tyson. And I spent, countless time at the Catskill gym. But here's the thing. Kevin Rooney was a great trainer for Mike Tyson. The two styles gelled. But Kevin Rooney never changed his style. So he had a tall, lanky fighter that was his name was Kieran. He was a good fighter, and Kevin had him fighting small and bobbing and weaving when he should have been using his jab. Bomac has a great fighter in Terrence Crawford. It'd be interesting to see how good he could bring another fighter. Dave says you need more Manny Stewarts. Now, that I agree with Dave 100%. Manny Stewart, and I think, and I should replay some of the interviews we had with Manny on this show. He was on the show quite a bit. The truth of the fact with Manny Stewart is simple. Manny Stewart, and all the definition of a good trainer, is a trainer that can take any fighter and make them better. Okay? Any fighter and make them better. Now, what did Manny Stewart do that was so good? He took fighters and he focused on their talent and what they could do well. And he emphasized that, made it a priority. And likewise, the things that they couldn't do well, he kicked to the curb, and that was what he did that made him such a great trainer. And I think that boxing needs more of those types of trainers, and yes, like I mentioned, I mentioned about my man, Kevin Rooney. He was great for Tyson, wasn't all that great for some other fighters. And it was an interesting question that we got about Bomac, and it would be interesting to see how Bomac handles some other fighters. But anyway, I told you guys that we had a great guest today, and joining us right now is undefeated fighter, and she's also ranked in the top 10 in the WBC and the WBA. Junior welterweight Amelia Moore joins us. Hey, Amelia, how you doing, man?
Hey, Billy, it's great to connect. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I was getting nervous. I reached out to you. I'm like, you're still good, right? And I didn't hear back. I was like, oh, geez, But interesting story. Congratulations on your career. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, I know you got a big fight coming up. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But right now, you're ranked in two of the major sanctioning bodies. You have an undefeated record at 2-0 with a knockout. But what I'm more interested in right now is you to tell us what it was like, because you were part of the Combat League with the Boston Butchers, where you had a perfect 12-0 record. What's it like fighting on a team of boxing?
Yeah, well, I mean, my transition over to TCL, which was my transition to the pros, came right out of Team USA. And I was a 3 Olympic cycle Team USA athlete for USA Boxing. So the team aspect is always, I mean, I love it. Especially TCL kind of cultivates that back up. You're not making weight by yourself. You have teammates, you have support system. The athletes you just have more around you. And I think that that's what's so different between boxing and MMA is I've noticed that, going to any of the MMA gyms, there seems to be they're big teams. People are coming to these gyms. Whereas boxing, we're so singular, like we may have a large kids program. There's only going to be a couple pros. People are brought in as training partners. But a lot of that time is spent solo dolo. So, I think TCL, like that's been, you leave with brothers and sisters. You go through the trenches with these people. You're traveling around the country. You're fighting back to back weeks. It gets gritty. It gets exhausting. And there's super high, super lows. And yeah, I think that it's been such a beautiful opportunity for athletes to make real money. You're looking at, especially in boxing, it's kind of like the economy right now. You've got some people in some low income situations, and then there's money at the top, and there's not much in the middle. So TCL has kind of really brought that up. I've seen athletes that are coming from accepting $500, male fighters in fights who are unsigned, just trying to make it, to making $2,500, $3,000 a week. They're walking away with 12 grand in a month from 3 or 4 fights with TCL. And it's creating worth and self-worth for these athletes that, I'll be honest, kind of weren't given. There was no opportunity to be afforded that prior to this league. So I know there's a lot of boxing purists out there. I kind of beholden myself to that boxing purist category, but I gotta applaud TCL for giving an opportunity to athletes to get opportunities. You saw Raiko Santana was in the prelims, fought Steven Nelson on the Canelo Crawford card. He's a TCL fighter. And then there were also 2 other TCL athletes from the Boston Butchers that fought on I think it was the open workout night for the underdog card. So, there's crazy opportunities that are happening for athletes that may not be afforded those opportunities otherwise, because promotions protect their athletes, and people don't want to take risks on something. And boxing's crazy. Like, I would say that I liken it so much to a race, like having a racehorse. Like, you are taking a high risk on, it's not like a team. You've got NFL, and like one athlete falls out, like that really sucks, but you're going to have somebody else to replace that athlete, and the rest of the team has to step up. Boxing, this is a singular athlete. People are investing in this, and you're really trying to protect their interests. So, which is great for the people who get those opportunities, but man, that sucks for growth. That can suck for other athletes that may be more talented and really should be the ones that should be getting invested into. So yeah, that's kind of my little pitch on TCL. It's been a wild ride for me. I got injured in April, and then they pitched me an opportunity to do broadcast and do ringside commentary, and picked up a new skill this summer and was having a blast with it. Just being able to be that voice. I think a lot of times we as athletes, we just don't get the platform to be able to really voice who we are. Like we get seen in this singular facet of what we are or what we're doing. And, we've got athletes out there that, we had an athlete that was going through paramedic school, and his wife was pregnant, and you have all of these aspects of athletes who are running jobs. And we had one that was going through, he's a minister, and it was just finished like a counseling program. And there's just so many beautiful things. So I think I really got to dig into not realizing I had a love for it, and being able to share stories to give a voice to all these athletes that, it's an aspect that I knew I myself at times have not been able to really capitalize on. So yeah, it's been cool. It's TCL. Let's go, guys. May the funding continue.
let me ask you this. You mentioned something, basically camaraderie, with the team. How can you transcend that to just a singular? Like, why can't you still have that camaraderie in a gym and still work with teammates, so to speak, even though you're not fighting as a team? Because not all fight. I mean, you got to have sparring. You got to, we were just talking about how, the training, in my opinion, has really went downhill over the last, 20 years. We have a lot of rah-rah people in the corner right now, and not a lot of teachers. How can you take the success, especially your experience with the TCL, and, move it over to boxing? And I don't understand why they don't count those fights anyway, but
yeah. No, I love that question. It's crazy. I got to spend the 5 weeks that Bud Crawford was here in Colorado, and they're always so welcoming to me. He's awesome. And I actually just had a conversation with one of his coaches, Coach Red, about that. And he's like, man, he's like, I know that you attest to this, Amelia. He's like, we have all these, influencer trainers that are getting all of this publicity and hype that's out on the internet, and they're doing BS combinations and flashy pad work, but where's the lessons they're learning? Where are the teachers, the real, the people that are like him? We've got the Alex Rivera's, the Alex Loves, the Ron Sims, the Freddie Roaches, the Bomax, and we've got the Coach Red, like Tudo, all of them, Bernie. It's like we've got these coaches that are really they're teaching the sweet science. There's a rhyme to the reason, and they're looking to build a champions from the ground up and instill knowledge. But to get back to your question, it's funny because he and I just had that conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, trust me, I know, like the real ones who know this sport know, the difference between real teachers, educators, and promoters of the sweet science. And then you see people that are just capitalizing on social media, and good for them. But like, also, I do wish that the true teachers and the people that are holding down the foundation were getting that light also. But, they're spending the time in the grit, in the gyms, not having somebody following around with a camera. So,
Well, you mentioned before, about the financial gain, and what one of the reasons you liked the TCL, and that's, to me, that's a catch-22 answer, because I agree with you about that. I agree that fighters need to make the most money that they possibly can. I mean, it's obviously an extremely it's a hurt business, right? So, but to make it all about the money is ruining the sport, because you're getting a lot of fighters, and I think it's all tied together with the guys that don't know how to train. So now they have a fighter, and in my opinion, they're taking advantage of the fighter because they're not preparing him or her to go into the ring and perform the way they should. You got the same token with a manager that may not know the sport, a promoter that doesn't know how to promote, and you've got all these people together, and they have a fighter, and maybe they have some money behind them, so they're tossing some money, so they're getting ranked, or they're getting the right fights, blah blah blah. And what's not happening is the fighter's not progressing, the fighter's not getting better, but the ranking and maybe the paycheck is, but it's hurting the sport, because you have fighters that work their tail off, that are in the gym, and I'm sure you've seen them working every day. They're in the gym, and they're not getting the opportunity because maybe they don't have that financial backing. I mean,
yeah, I'm one of
that's
them.
the negative.
You're talking to one.
Well, that's the negative side of it, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd have to argue back that TCL is the opportunity for those athletes that are talented, that don't have that backing. And that's what I mean. Like, right?
In other words, it doesn't. I was earlier in the show, and I don't mean to cut you off, but earlier in the show, we were talking about how I think boxing, the sport of boxing, needs unity. But all we get is division. Everything is division. Everybody wants that successful UFC model. Come on, let's be real. That's what it's about, right? I mean, that's where, these promoters and even the fighters are guaranteed certain paychecks, and just like you mentioned earlier with the TCL, so how can we make it all work so the sport rises again?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's talk through it. I would also argue on the other side, like that with Zuffa, just talking about the UFC model, there is so much pushback. I mean, if you look at, there's so many, like the commissions themselves. I just saw something put out by the president Solomon from WBC. He was pushing back because in the US, it's like we do have the Muhammad Ali Act. We do have these in place that are supposed to be protecting the athletes. In the same token, the UFC model, successful, I wish it would go back to what it was before. What I see it as now, and what I don't want that to become in boxing, is they have the right to decide who sponsorships are, what percentage is going to what athlete, and deciding worth. And I don't think that that's a progression in sport. I think that's a control in sport. And now you've got athletes who are signed by the promotion and they decide who gets the opportunities. That's crazy. There's no free agency. And so I agree. There is constant division because there's so much money. Everyone's trying to hold on to their bits and pieces. Which I think was why it was almost exciting. Like, it's exciting kind of what the Riyadh season is doing with invigorating it with lots of money and kind of having fingers in all of the big promotions. Like, you saw him getting involved, Turkey Al-Sheikh getting involved with Eddie Hearns, attempting to do so with Top Rank and creating these, really big shows. But again, the separateness of them individually, I'm not sure how to answer that, but I agree that it's a problem. We need to, again, it's about guarding interest. And it's like, you can kind of see where Turkey on that side's like, if you don't fight, you're out. If you're not, we're gonna, and I'll tell you, MVP, what I see with Jake, what he's doing, and Nikisa and Mike, what they're doing with the females, they're creating hard fights. They're creating hard fights against their, obviously they're signing people who either have large Instagram followings or have belts. I don't see them really signing anybody else, which is unfortunate because there's other talent too. But they know that that's going to be a draw, but I don't see them giving feeder fights to their athletes. If they're giving big fights to people who with belts, and we've seen a couple of their signed athletes lose those belts in the last few months. So.
And though it doesn't diminish their value.
Yes.
And that's been my battle cry. The boxing fan has been brainwashed to feel that the O means if you lose your O, you don't have any worth anymore, which is wrong. MVP, yeah, okay. He has done well for female boxing. I mean, the Serrano and Katie Taylor fights were, fantastic. I mean, I'd watch another one, but and neither one of them regressed at all with their position in the sport, but I just think that, and you mentioned Dana White. That was actually my topic today. And, boxing has a tendency to take the wagons and circle the guy with all the money. Right. And, it's happened throughout history of the sport. I mean, I wrote a book about a freed slave in the 1800s. It was the same back then, but the truth of the matter is if people go back not that long ago, PBC was supposed to save boxing. They gave us all these fights on TV for free, and everyone, PBC is going to save us, and they didn't, because they wouldn't work with anybody. And Turkey Al-Sheikh, he's doing the same thing. He takes over the ring belt. Now you hear Dana White saying he's not going to work with any of the sanctioning bodies, which, the sanctioning bodies are half the problem, in my opinion, because we need unity. You need one. I had come up with this idea several years back where you could actually break boxing as a league into divisions, with each of the four major sanctioning bodies as a division, so they could still maintain their clause in their sanctioning fees. And then ultimately the champions would be the undisputed. I mean, it could work if they're willing to play nice, which they don't. But how can the product of boxing, benefit not only the fighters, but the fans?
Yeah. And we're looking at even advancing the sport so much. You saw that Alicia Baumgartner relinquished her WBC because, they don't believe. And I know that I saw Roxy Right Hook Roxy had was on a podcast and talking about how she went to the women's summit, and the doctors, they had said, that women shouldn't fight 2-minute rounds because of whatever research that they have. I would love to see that. I need to look into that, but it's
I hate
BS
that.
to me.
It's
BS to me.
I hate that. Listen, I worked with Chevelle Halbach for years. We won multiple belts together, and I love her. Okay, I don't like that she's still wanting to fight now, but that's, her decision. But she was always a class act, in and out of the ring. And, you need more fighters like her. I met, and I shouldn't even bring up the name, but that's what I'm about. I tell it like it is, and I hope I don't offend you. But I met Clarissa Shields after she won her first gold medal. I did a women's boxing event in Florida, and she was the sweetest, nicest person. I really thought that she was going to change the complexion of female boxing, because at that time it was still on the rise, and I think it's come a long way. But what she has become is, in my opinion, is the worst thing for female boxing. I think you have all these the talent in women's boxing right now is at an all-time high. And you can't, what made them so good, what I thought made women's boxing so good, was that women had a tendency to fight the fights the fans wanted. They didn't duck anybody. They didn't run, and now it's like they're starting to follow the men's, and I just hope they don't regress. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, without doubt, I think it was 5 weight classes she's gone up and down. I mean, she's, as far as her talent, she's the GOAT,
In her
without
mind,
doubt.
in her
Yeah,
mind.
I mean, even so, like her last title defense against Danielle Perkins. I mean, that was a hell of a show. That was a big ask, and it's like we liken it. I would liken it to Crawford stepping up to Canelo with that weight difference. Its height and weight difference was crazy with Danielle and Clarissa, but it disheartens me a little bit. Not disheartens me. It pains me to see that we're not all kind of coming together in sport as females to demanding parity. And again, like, just to go back to, the WBC's stance, like, it's unfortunate. It is, because yet they're still saying that, well, you're only fighting 2-minute rounds. Well, now you're trying to say that science is the reason that we're not worth the money we're worth, because women, man, we're here. You ask anybody, they're like, oh, well, women don't draw crowds. That's not true. Like, we fight like the opportunity is going to be taken away because it could at any moment, and
Listen,
the veracity is amazing.
again, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I had
No, please.
last week we had Harvey Dock on the show, and he specifically said, because I asked him about what it was like, refereeing the Serrano and Katie Taylor fight. And he said it was an all-women's card. It was the greatest thing. He said it was sold out. They sell. So I mean, he said it on the show. So what you're saying is 100% true. That the WBC doesn't want to lose their clause. They're just like every other sanctioning body. They only look at their sanctioning body as the sanctioning body, and nobody else exists. There lies the problem. And unfortunately, they're not going to go away because it's a moneymaker for them. All these belts, these eliminators, that's all sanctioning fees. How do you think they make their money? People don't understand it. And the worst part is when you have all these belts, you dilute the value of having a belt. There seems to be more fighters with belts than fighters without.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm in one of those, I very much so see any interaction, like, how can I create value in the space that I'm walking into? Not, some people see it the other way. Like, what do they have to offer me? I don't. I know that if I can create value will end up being reciprocated. And I think the hard thing for me is to go and again, seeing the WBC stance, and if they're truly in it for money, if you're making the opportunity to create more money where we're extending these rounds to 3 minutes potentially, right? The value is going to increase. There's more money to tap into. So I think it's a missed opportunity, as a business wise, period. And it's what I see it as is, there's more, especially like historically. I know Alicia is fighting the 12 3-minute rounds. There's huge endorsement. When you make history, look at Crawford. people getting behind him, when you're looking to test the scales and really push fate, push history, and really tip the scales in the favor of something that's never people don't have the vision for, there's a lot of people who want to get behind that. So because if it's pulled off, how many people want to be like, say that they were on the right side of that potential? So
No, hey, listen, I loved what Terrence Crawford did. It wasn't about the money. I mean, obviously he made a good chunk of change, but he didn't do it for the money. And I said, I said it on the last show. I hope that by him challenging himself and doing something that other people told him he couldn't do, except for me. I said that he would win the fight 2 years ago when he started calling Canelo out. I just knew that he would, but I hope he inspires other fighters to do the same thing, to challenge themselves and understand that there's not a loser in that fight. Canelo's career is not over because he lost, and Crawford's fight career wouldn't have been over either if he lost. People would have just said, "Yeah, I told you so. You shouldn't have moved up that much." So I mean, there are calculated risks that you could take in the sport of boxing. So speaking of which, so your plan now, you're going to focus on just your career. There's no more team boxing for you.
So right now I'm talking to them. I am just focusing on my career primarily, looking at a fast track towards a world title. Big things happening next year in 2026, but they've asked me to come back doing broadcast. I am super stoked for that. There's an opportunity to still stay involved with the league, help them grow, help the athletes grow, and help me grow. I mean, gosh, what a crazy resume builder. I got to work with Ray Flores and Claudia, and Beto Duran, like some of the best, and even the directors who are handling the broadcast they've been involved in the biggest projects in broadcast history. So if you looked at their resumes, I've had really, really great mentors. So not looking to fight next year, but looking to come back on as a ringside commentator. And I'm totally fine with that. I love that. And being able to also just really focus in on what I'm doing and moving through the ranks and going after big fights. So, I mean, that's been kind of my thing. Even my pro debut, I was not interested in doing a four rounder. I wanted to jump right into 6, and they were like, easy. And I'm like, listen, I skydive, I ride motorcycles, I snowboard. Like I know what I'm capable of. And I also know how seasoned I am. And I don't think it was necessary, but just a little bit of a safeguard. They asked me to do 2, and I was like, okay, fine. But yeah, I mean, even for me, I wanted my pro debut to be a six rounder, and I wanted it to be against seasoned ranked athletes, and the last 2 have been. So, again, like looking for the big fights, looking for, I don't want to say big, yes, looking for big fights because it's supposed to be building towards something, but looking for progressive fights, every single one of them. I hate the narrative when we, just like you said, looking back where these athletes are being protected. No, I train every single fight. It doesn't even matter. Every sparring session, like I'm the underdog, like I'm B-side. It doesn't matter if I'm with a promotion or not. I train like I'm B-side. I train like anything could happen. And I train to overestimate my opponents, because that's how you grow. You go to sparring sessions, you seek out athletes that are as good as you, if not better, and you seek out the people in the spaces that are going to push your growth, because otherwise, what the F are we doing here? It's just like, if you're not here to try to like expand and be the best, then like, please go home, because there's resources that you're tying up for other athletes that want to be the best.
Exactly. And the thing is, I've never blamed the fighters except for one, but I've never blamed the fighters, so to speak, because it's not them. Like you just said, you explained it perfectly. You work your ass off. You're trained for the fight. You're trying your best. You're not taking your opponent lightly. You want to go in there. You want to perform. You want to pay yourself back for all the sweat and work you put in, and you get some slug in there that had no business being in the same ring, and it's demoralizing to the fighter that has worked hard, and I don't think it helps the fighters. And it doesn't.
No,
It's
I'll
certainly
turn those fights down though. Like if I think that and that's, I don't, it's not to be disrespect. I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm so much better. No, especially in the women's divisions, there's a gap, man. Like there's a talent gap. And when you've had 100 amateur fights and I've fought all over the world, I don't want to go in there and look great against a small fish in a small pond. I want to look like a great fighter against another person who holds respect within the space.
well. You don't get. Look, I've said this for years. You don't get better by fighting lesser opposition. The only way you're going to get better is if you up your level of opposition with every fight, so that when
Mhm.
you get your title shot, you're going to hold on to that title for a long time. I'll never. I always use it as an example, but I'll never forget. A fighter. I don't even want to mention his name, but he wins a world title, right? And then he loses, and then his Lou DeBell, his promoters on the show telling me, well, he's still learning. Wait a minute, what do you mean he's still learning? He just won a world title. You can't say that you're learning after you win a world title. You're supposed to learn and then prepare yourself for a world title, then keep the title for a while. That's my thoughts. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, my progression in sport has been to be undeniable. And I think that that's every single day. And, amateur boxing is super tough, right? There's a lot of politics. You can fight a host country in their country, and there's a lot of robberies, but, becoming undeniable where your skill set, you're pushing every day to have so many tools in the toolbox that you have an answer for every question that's being presented. And I agree. Like are we looking at, and I find that if you look at some of the pro careers, people jump towards the money. And it kind of brings back to what you said a little bit a few minutes ago about, the money kind of spoiling things. And we look at these opportunities where people kind of jump towards these big paydays they're not ready for. And then they're like, oh, well, we weren't ready, like we got it, but we couldn't hold on to it because we weren't built properly. We were built sloppily by having too easy opponents, having progressive fights, and then jumping at opportunities that you weren't ready for. And I hate hearing how there was a teammate of mine and, there was an opportunity for a world title opportunity. And they were like, oh, well, you may not get that again. Well, that's BS. Let it go now, because the goal is to be undeniable. It's not to have a shot. Like, F your shot. When I'm ready, this is going to be everything. And that's what I told her. I was just like, dude, let that go. Like,
It's called cash out, and that's what
Yeah.
the teams do now. They coddle the fighter. They get them all the wins. They get them in that title shot. There's the payday. So you figure, okay, and the management says, okay, this is the fight. We're going to get all our money back. We're going to make a few bucks, and if my fighter wins, I'm going to get another win. If not, it's over. And that's the unfortunate part, because the fighter themselves, they're not looking at it that way, most of them anyway. But speaking of fights, unfortunately, I'm not going to be ringside for your next fight. I'm going to be at the following one, but October 11th, Foxwoods, you're going to be on that card. Tell us about your opponent.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am fighting a 17 fight veteran MMA fighter who's had 5 appearances in the UFC. Has had one boxing event. I wish that she had a little bit more boxing experience, but she has a pretty good stand-up game, switch fighter, which is really exciting for me because I also been training really hard to also become switch and be able to fight southpaw too. It's so much fun. And at this point, it's like, if your footwork's good enough, you kind of do it anyway. It's just this natural progression, and to be able to use your hand, you be able to punch off of any foot and any step. So, yeah, I mean, we know MMA fighters are really tough, they're tough, can come forward, they switch, they're super unorthodox, right? So, fighting down to one,
they can take a punch.
They can take a punch. They got a hell of a chin, right? They're real tough.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. It's going to be a scrappy fight, 6-rounder. If I'm coming down to 135 for it, for this fight, and just kind of floating between. I knew I wanted to eventually come down to 135. I didn't think right now it's like we've had movement at 140. And it's easy. Like I very easily make 140. A little bit extra work to make 135, but it's not crazy. I mean, I fought 125, 57 kilo for Team USA for 2 years. So, I mean, I floated from 125 all the way up to 147. So anything's possible if you do it right. But so yeah, that's what we're looking at is my first 6-rounder, and I think it's gonna be a fun night. I don't know. I'm ready. I feel like I'm so over ready at this point. Had an amazing camp with Bud, and jumped right into the last 3 weeks here where I got to work with Nili Block, who she's a Israeli fighter, 7-time world champion kickboxer, southpaw. Man, what a firecracker. I mean, she is a hell of an athlete. She's getting ready to make her pro debut here in November. So, she happened to be in Denver, and I really love how the stars kind of aligned to get me back into the ring full steam, full board for October 11th.
Well, I'm real sorry I'm not going to be there because I would have liked to have met you in person. Quick question.
Eventually.
Oh yeah,
You
no.
will be. I know you will be.
Paths are going to cross. I know that. But not looking ahead. I don't really want you to look past your fight on the 11th. But do you have plans to fight again this year, or are you're focusing on 26?
Yeah. So to be determined. Would love to fight in December. If that works out the way it does. The full goal this year was to fight 4 or 5 times and have like a massive year. And it's like every time you make plans, the universe is just kind of like puts you back in check. So, hoping that we'll see if it ends up working out December, if a card comes up, if CES Boxing has something that pops up beginning mid-December before the holiday season. If not, end of January, beginning of February. So we will see. We'll see what happens. I'll be ready if it is, and if it's not until the late winter, January, February, then we'll still be ready. So just kind of like setting up dates and trying to have a big year for 26 also.
Well, Jimmy is an old school promoter. Not many left like him, so you're in good hands. Trust me there. We got a lot of people in the chat room speaking highly of you. They can't wait to see you fight, and I appreciate you joining us. And I hope we can get you back after you win. Maybe we'll plan on getting you back. And you can
love that. Let's
it.
go. And thanks everybody that's tuning in. That's in the chat room. That's fantastic. I can't see it from my end, but I appreciate your guys' support. And yeah, I'm just gonna send out if I'll have all my stuff posted on my webpage, ameliamoreboxing.com. So the live stream link will go live. I'm working on getting that. I guess it's being live streamed through TMT, the money team, because of Hagler. So Mayweather, I had no idea he had a streaming agency and also an app, but they're going to be doing exclusively through TMT. And I'll throw that up on my website and my socials so that, anybody that can't be there in person can still tap in and get to just immerse in the excitement.
Sounds good. And I'll be over the next day or so. I'll cut out your spot here and I'll send you the link. All right.
You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Billy. It's wealth of knowledge coming out of you, man. Love this.
I appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to have you back. So have a good night. Good luck on the 11th, and I can't wait to see you the next time. Hey, I know they're fighting. I know it's a little soon, but I am going to be at their November 1st show. So hey, if you want to fight back to back, but in any event, all right.
Talk to Jimmy Sr. See if he can grab me another opponent. We'll just jump on for funsies.
Hey, listen, I'm still going to collect the dinner from him from something that we did a while ago. So maybe I'll bring it up. But in any event, thanks for coming on. I look forward to the next time.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Amelia Moore. What a great girl. What a great fighter. She's ready to go. If you're in the Connecticut area, October 11th at Foxwoods on the undercard of, she mentioned Hagler. This is marvelous Marvin Hagler's grandson is taking on Teflon Don. John Gotti's grandson, the same guy who fought Mayweather a couple of times. But in any event, we got my man Dave says he did see her in a TCL fight, which is cool. Give a shout out to my man Mark Allen Baker. We're going to get him back on the show. Love his stuff. Great writer. So anyway, I got all discombobulated because I was on a rant there about boxing, and then Amelia came in and kind of hit it home what we were saying. And, it's a shame that, you can't take the success and the camaraderie that she mentioned for the team boxing and applying it to, singular, because it's kind of, I would think the same thing. But anyway, we were talking about trainers and, not having real good trainers and what makes a trainer good. And just to close that thought, sometimes the fighter and the trainer they gel, and they do very well together. I always use Mike Tyson and Kevin Rooney because, when Kevin Rooney and Mike Tyson split, neither one of them were ever the same, ever. Kevin had several other fighters and just, never had the success he had with Tyson. And you could make the argument about Mike Tyson as well. The middleweight division was always a glamour division. And, I always thought of the middleweight division as being right behind the heavyweight division, to be honest with you. I loved Dave, thanks for stopping in. He's got to go train some people now. He's heading back to the gym. I love the welterweight division. I mean, I love all the divisions, okay? I definitely like the original 8, but that's a whole nother story. But the middleweight division, which should be a hot division, right? Do you know anybody in the middleweight division? Do you know any of the names? I mean, I'm gonna go over them with you because I have them in front of me. The champion that has the most belts. He holds the IBF belt and also the WBO belt. Is and me, who's the murderer of the English language? Billy C. That's why I can't even pronounce my own last name. But it's Janabek Ali Kamili. He is the IBF middleweight world champion and the WBO middleweight world champion. Okay. The other champions are Urslandi Lara for the WBA. He just turned 105. And Carlos Adames is the WBC champ. Now, here's the rankings. They're very interesting. In the IBF, they have no one ranked at number 1, no one ranked at number 2. They have a collection of names here that I got to be honest. I mean, I watch a lot of fights, and I haven't heard of them. The only ones I heard that are, I've heard of Squiva Falco, but ranked at number 4 as Hazmaz Shiraz, number 5 Chris Eubank Jr., which shocks me that Chris Eubank Jr. is behind Shiraz when you look at the two resumes, but that's that. Shane Mosley Jr. is number 7, and Serhiy Derevyanchenko is at number 8. That's in the IBF. I'm naming known fighters, right? The WBO also has Smash Shiraz at number 1, Denzel Bentley at number 2, Shane Mosley Jr. at number 3, Chris Eubank at number 5, and Connor Coyle at number 11. The WBA, they have Shane Mosley number 2, Connor Coyle at number 3, Denzel Bentley at number 5, and interesting, they have no one rated at number 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. How does a sanctioning body have nobody rated in all those spots. Could it be because the fighters are ranked in other sanctioning bodies? I don't know. So the Ring magazine, they don't have a world champion, but they have excuse me, they have Alec Liam Kahan Oli, which, sorry, dude, at number 1, Carlos Adames at number 2, Urslandi Lara at number 3, Chris Eubank at number 4, Shiraz at number 5, Yoelanis Hernandez at number 6, Shane Mosley at 7, Sergey Deverenchenko at number 8, Estosa Ola at number 9, and Aaron McKenna at number 10. I'm okay with those top 10. And I wish the other sanctioning bodies were similar. The ESPN, their top 10 rankings, Alan, the guy that I can't, Ali Khan Oli is how I think you say his last name. Carlos Adames at number 2, Urslandi Lara at number 3, Chris Eubank at number 4, Shiraz at number 5. And I think Shiraz around 5 or 6 is legit. Shane Mosley at 6, Yoelanis Hernandez at 7, Deverenchenko at 8, Esquiva Falco at 9, and Itonoza Ola Ohaya at number 10. My point here is, where are the middleweights, man? Where are the 160 pounders? Obviously we don't have any, a lot of United States heavyweight, middleweights fighting in that division. It's kind of sad, but in any event, we had Amelia Moore on, who's fighting on a CES boxing card in Foxwoods on October 11th. Well, November 1st, it's a Saturday, is CES Boxing Autumn Classic. It's always a great card, and I'm going to be ringside, so get yourself some tickets. Make sure you tell them Billy C sent you. Boxing is a little slow this week with fights. We don't have any major fights scheduled until next week. Some upcoming fights I'm looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to the Jake Paul Tank Davis fight, which is November 14th. I think Tank Davis has basically sold out boxing. I know he's making a boatload of cash, but I'm a purist. I think the Mike Tyson Floyd Mayweather fight has fizzled out. I haven't heard anything on that. October 11th, if you're not going to Foxwoods, Boots Ennis is taking on Usima Lima on the Zone. I think Lima's a legit test for Ennis, who I'm not that high on, to be honest with you. October 25th, Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley. I like Fabio Wardley, but I don't think he stands a chance with Parker. And November 22nd, also on the Zone, Benavidez is taking on Anthony Yarde. He's putting his title on the line. I think this is going to be a tougher than expected fight for Benavidez. Anthony Yarde is a good fighter. He's a good fighter. The problem is he's a come-at-you fighter, and that's exactly what Benavidez likes. And I'll be breaking down that fight extensively when we get closer to it. Next week, I'll break down the in his fight and any others that I didn't catch right now. But that's for the next week. But now
it's now time for Random Thoughts with Billy C.
Our new little promo. I got some random thoughts, and they're not necessarily going to be boxing related. First and foremost, I'm going to get a little political here with the government shutdown. What kind of bullshit is that? What kind of bullshit? These parties, I don't care what side you're on. Well, I kind of do, but I don't care what side you're on. But, the finger pointing and all of this. Who's suffering? the people, the military. They're not going to be getting paid. Is that what I read today? I mean, over not agreeing on how to spend all of our money that they take from us. I think the government shutting down is one of the most ridiculous things that our political landscape could show. So that's a random thought I have. The other two have to do with some New York sports teams. All right. First of all, it saddens me to admit that I'm a Mets and Jets fan. So let me talk about the Mets first. If that wasn't the worst choking of a season that you've ever seen, and how embarrassing it is to be a Mets fan after, they spend all that gazillion dollars and they have all these superstars on this team and they were so ahead. I mean, it was like the tortoise and the hare, they were so ahead. Everybody was already putting them in the World Series. And then, no wait, they started going on multiple 6, 7, 8 game losing streaks. And it all boiled down. The Clowns still had a chance to make it to the playoffs. All they had to do was beat one of the weakest teams in the majors, in the Miami Marlins. And they lost 2 out of 3. And it kicked them to the curb. The Reds got in, and they got hammered by the Dodgers. So the Mets, shame on you. Now for the Jets. The Jets, unfortunately for me, I've been a Jet fan since I was a kid. I got to see Joe Namath as a kid win the Super Bowl. It was the first football game I remember watching. Never thought that I'd live the rest of my life watching a shit team. This team is a joke. It's embarrassing being a team, being a fan. They, over the years, have had talent, but they never could put it together. They made it to the AFC Championship several times. We lost to Pittsburgh. We lost to the Ravens. We lost to the Broncos in the famous Mile High game. And, of course, in 1981, we lost to the Dolphins in the Mud Bowl. Those were the only years we got to the championship game and failed to get to the Super Bowl after Joe Willie took them to the Super Bowl in 1969. Now, my thoughts on the Jets. They're cursed. Somebody sent me, actually, one of my son-in-laws sent me a thing. It was a picture, and it had Joe Namath with Satan. And the deal was Satan gives Joe Namath the Super Bowl win, and in return, the Jets never win again. And I think that that's the case. It was sad to watch the game the other day. It's sad to hear and see the things. I mean, the turnovers, the injuries, and then they lose their players. Sickening to be a Jets fan. I wanted to get that off my chest. It was a random thought. I will be getting into some of other sports on occasion, but far and few in between. Listen, that's going to do it for today's show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby.